Hi guys, so our friend and very active contributor CL Strife suggested I address the question of why INFJs are considered the most rational feelers, right? You know that there's many different kinds of feelers, but INFJs are considered the most rational feelers. Why is that the case? Why do they have the reputation? I think it's an interesting question to address, partly because I may have a perspective that's slightly different from that of the majority, and you're going to understand this straight away. I do not think that INFJs are the most rational of the feelers, right? I'm going to try to defend that point of view, and you'll see if you're convinced by it or not. I'll note here, and this might come back, as a topic or as a comment later in the video, that Jung calls intuitive dominant irrational types. Right, whereas he also calls judging dominant, such as INFPs, for example, rational types, ENFJs too. All the F dominants and T dominants will be rational. So this will give you a little hint of where I'll be going in this video, okay? The important thing that needs to be done, first of all, to clear up some confusion, is to distinguish two terms: rational and logical. I would argue that INFJs are the most logical of the feelers, potentially along with ISFJs, but they are not the most rational of the feelers. Now, the difference between logical and rational is something like this. Logical is a term that is actually quite precise. Right? You can make it quite precise. Logic is the study and practice of valid inference. That is to say that you're able to connect different statements. Different statements have certain characteristics, certain structural characteristics, and a truth value. They're true or false, unless they're nonsense. But let's assume that we don't take into account nonsense here. So they're either true or false. Now, connecting statements, being able to infer from one statement and other statements, performing deductions, for example, as an instance of inference, so that you preserve the truth value of a particular statement, is being logical, is practicing good logic. So, if you like, you could have, this is the important thing to realize, you could have a perfectly logical structure to an argument that yields a false conclusion because it has false premises. What matters in the being logical is that you articulate all the different propositions correctly, right? And some people are more logical than others. There are some people who just make mistakes in logic, that they're not able to make the right inference from the particular premises, right? INFJs are really good at that, usually on the condition that they have their TI well developed. And among all the feelers, INFJs and ISFJs are the two feelers that have the highest potential in logical proficiency because of their possession of TI. TI is the most important function when we talk about inference, valid inference, as you practice it in day-to-day life, not necessarily the scholarly study of it, right? TI has this specificity that it seeks for correctness and coherence, and that is very much dependent on having a system of expression that is very much underlain by valid inference, that is being logical. Being rational is actually a much more nebulous term. It's a much more sort of whooshy, vague term. It's useful pragmatically, it's useful heuristically, and usually when you talk about someone being rational, you understand what people mean. It might vary from culture to culture, it might vary from community to community in the way that being logical doesn't, right? Being logical is a bit like math, you're either logical or you're not. Whereas being rational, it depends on the community you're going to be in, it depends on the culture you're going to be in to some degree. But at a rough, approximation, we might say something like being rational is being tuned in the way that you behave, in the way that you think, in the way that you operate in the world, according to the way the world works, okay? So there's a sense of being connected to the way reality works, with the knowledge that the best way to understand the way reality works is to understand it through a scientific point of view, right? But if you leave aside the scientific point of view, there's a way that the world works, the way that reality works, social reality included, and someone who's rational is someone who's comfortable in that world, someone who's able to operate in that world, including setting particular purposes and knowing the world works, attaining those purposes. So in fact, what immediately strikes us here is that someone who's highly illogical is going to be impeded when engaging in rational undertakings. There is a sense in which you cannot be a very sort of deficient logical person, like a very illogical person, and be rational. You're going to be hindered. However, being logical is not a sufficient condition for being rational, because again, you could start from either false premises or unverified premises, or premises that are just strange, and you could still deduct a whole series of, you know, statements and then a conclusion from that questionable premise, or that, you know, slightly mysterious premise that is perfectly logical, right? So you could be logical and not very hooked to the world, right? Whereas there's a strong sense in which being rational is being hooked to the external world. And I think that once we accept this, we can understand why INFJs don't really qualify at, you know, at face value anyway, as the most rational of the feelers, because INFJs have a strong connection to their NI worldview, their NI world, and the NI world is not characterized by a deep care for the way the external world works, which is why you'll notice a lot of INFJs, including a lot of famous INFJs, by no means all, of course you have INFJs who are scientists, you have INFJs who are famous physicists, like Niels Bohr and others, but you also have like Rupert Sheldrake's, you know, you also have Carl Jung himself in some ways, or Hermann Hesse in writing, people who are interested in exploring weird hypotheses, like for example, synchronicity in Carl Jung it's not a rational principle, you know. Carl Jung himself will be the first to admit this. It's not a rational principle. You can articulate it in a perfectly competently coherent manner, but it's not rational, because it's not really hooked to the way the world works in terms of the scientific postulates, right? Someone who probably has quite developed NI, although not an INFJ, is Chris Langan. If you're familiar with this man, he's supposed to be like the smartest guy in America or something in terms of his IQ, and he's developed like a particular, you know, model of the universe and so on. You'll notice he's very much like that as well. Like, you know, he's logical, but his premises sometimes seem to be kind of divorced from, you know, external reality. From this perspective, we can understand why an INFP and an ENFJ will be classified by Jung under the rational types, whereas the INFJ wouldn't. Because, well, like, an ENFJ is very kind of hooked to the world, and they're able to achieve their purposes. INFPs are quite hooked to external reality as well by means of their emotions, and usually they are able to be in tune, okay? They might experience various issues and things like that, but emotions are a way of being rationally connected to external reality as well, you know, and INFPs are very closely connected to their emotions. That tells them something about the way they're feeling and about situations that they want to or don't want to be in, and they act accordingly. INFJs are more divorced from that because they're more alienated from that, okay? So logical, yes, the most logical probably along with ISFJs, but not the most rational. So let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree or disagree. Give a like to this video if you would be so kind. If you want to explore more about the INFJ, you know, I've written 2 books on the topic. The Ecstatic Soul, which is my book on the INFJ mind, INFJ consciousness, and its existential manifestations. Check out the links below. And my latest book, The Infinite Soul, which is the sequel, looking more at how this peculiar mind that the INFJ has interacts with external reality, the world, to find happiness, purpose, value, and a rich life. So it's a guide to INFJ happiness, you could argue. And the link is below. If you have the book, loved it, but haven't reviewed it, please consider reviewing it. It really helps me with referencing. And as usual, don't forget, Patreon is the lifeblood of my channel. This channel can keep going thanks to the support of my Patreon supporters, anywhere from $3.50 a month. You can click the link below if you're interested. You can access some bonus content, talk to me, suggest new videos, and I'll be soon doing some more in-depth, you know, sort of studies of particular themes in my book there, so that could also be of interest. In the meantime, take care and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.